Another code, Recollection. I had very little knowledge about this title before going into it. All I knew was that it was a mystery, puzzle, adventure game where you're exploring a house. I looked up to see how long it would take to beat this game, and the website said around 15 hours. Imagine my surprise at the 5-hour mark when the story was wrapping up. I turned to the littlest and said, how on earth are they going to stretch this out for another 10 hours or so? He told me it was actually 2 games in 1, which was surprising and depressing. The reason I said it was depressing was that there's actually 10 more hours of this. I thought maybe I was zooming through the game. Everything in this was just so plotting and illogical. I really want to talk about this game in detail, but then I would just be giving out spoilers. So I've decided to do it generically. The first game is about Ashley, who comes to an island with her Aunt Jessica. She comes to this island to meet up with her thought-to-be dead father. She gets to the island, and this is actually going to be a running theme throughout these games, but she's going to be abandoned by another character who tells her to stay there. Of course she doesn't, and it looks like her sister's been abducted. She has to find a way to get into the house to search for her, while Ghost helps her out. The Ghost was a very strange addition to this game. At the time, it had a sort of sense of realism, and then it just throws in supernatural elements for no real reason. And it also kind of breaks the gameplay if she used him correctly. It's the same problem I have with Maya in the Phoenix Wright series. If you have the power to channel the dead, do it and tell us who the killer is. In this, if you have a ghost who can go through walls, use them to see hidden rooms or where you need to go. This is an extremely linear game. It pretends that it's not by having different places to explore, but most of these places are locked and you're going to need to solve puzzles to unlock the next doors in this mansion, and it makes no logical sense. His father lives in this mansion with one helper, and they spend all their time locking up every room and putting keys behind the puzzles and safe. No one does this! Now, to be fair, there are a few puzzles that actually make sense. But when you have a dial puzzle that's based on a water fountain to unlock a ladder, it becomes ridiculous. Who would ever install that? Or having a power box that needs keys in order to work? That seems like terrible planning. What's even crazier is when they leave this island and they never say, we should go back to the mansion and relock every door you opened. No, they just leave. What happened to the people that were so crazy that they needed to keep every door locked on a deserted island? The pacing was terrible, and the places that we go to were not that interesting. It felt like we were touring a museum instead of a house that people live in. It's very boring to play because everything was moving so slowly. The plot was actually interesting enough to keep you going. When Ashley and the ghost named Dee go into rooms, the ghost will consistently have memory flashes, which will help you find the object you need to find in the room. If anyone ever made a drinking game with this title, anytime someone said, I just remembered something, you would be sloshed an hour in. They do give you a map which would give you hints, but there's also a hint system that would also give you tiered hints, which would give you a generic hint, then a more direct answer. The controls were not great. They were stiff, and oftentimes you would have to maneuver around things that shouldn't really stop you. For example, when you're in a graveyard, there's nothing really stopping you from going to a grave, but they want you to take an unseen path to get there. It feels like a gameplay decision that you would see years ago when 3D gaming first came out. They wanted to make it look like they had an open world, but it really wasn't. Now, the best thing about this title is the comic book-like cutscenes, which were all voiced, which constantly furthered the plot. But when you get into the world itself, they're just like voice clips. Why not just voice everything? It was such a strange decision. Sometimes they have multiple choices on what you can ask someone about, but you still have to ask them everything, so it really doesn't matter which one you do first. There were times when they would give you an option to pick from, but it was a choice of one to pick from. So why bother even having this? The second game gave you different options where you want to take the conversation, but as far as I could tell, it would go in the same direction, but with different lines in the conversation. The second game was hands down better, but unfortunately you have no option to jump into it if you don't want to play the first game. But that doesn't mean the second game doesn't have issues of its own, like having silly setups to go to locations. For example, they actually send you on a quest to return a hat to a person, and this very simple quest will take you over 2 hours because you go on so many tangents before you get to your goal. This is a consistent issue. There's a time where you need to meet up with someone and you get roped into talking with another character at her house. And the whole time I was thinking, why are we a part of this? And to be fair, the person who we were seeing had the exact same thought. It didn't make any sense. I think the locations were more interesting in the second game, but the puzzles were dumbed down in this one for the most part. There are a couple puzzles where you had to think, but most of them were really easy. So much so, it feels like they added it just for consistency in the series, and just wanted to get through them as quickly as possible. Another code, Recollection, is one of the slowest puzzle adventure games I've ever played. It has a lethargic pace and it won't change it at all for the 15 hours you're playing this, and you're just going to have to be on board with it. If this interests you, I would say get it on a deep sale. It has a lot of problems, but the overall story is just interesting enough to keep you going. If you're going to get this, I would wait for a really good sale.